as I start my career at the NBA Africa, what I really look forward to is to bring more partners on board.
It fundamentally took the arrival of the lawyers to come up with two great concepts over time, one being the salary cap and the other being the media rights.
People were shocked, like the world was shocked. What is the country doing? But that shock was positive for us because then it created interest. And so I think it's really exciting. And I think a future of more sports activities, I think is a future of transformation for the continent.
I think it'll be useful for the audience to know more about Clare Akamanzi, the lady, the lawyer, boss man.
I grew up to refugee parents in Uganda. The history of Rwanda at the time meant that my parents and grandparents had to move as refugees to Uganda. And so growing up with that identity question, but who am I and why can I not be free to say I'm from this place or this place?
Welcome in the Valley. I'm your host today and my name is Ibrahim Sanya. We have an amazing show today, but before that, a gentle reminder, press that subscribe button, join the community of funders and founders, changing sports, tech, entertainment, and fashion from Africa to the rest of the world, and never miss a thing. Enjoy the show. Claire, such a pleasure to be here with you in Joburg in your phenomenal offices. After so long, it's a pleasure to host you on the show. I've known you over a decade. From Rwanda, you took me to that lovely country, and today you're running the most fabulous organization in sports, in my view, which is the NBA. And what I've been asking myself so long is why it took them so long to realize that, like in the US, you needed lawyers to come and make it successful. Now they got a lawyer in you. Why did it take them so long, and how is it going?
Well, it's going very well, Ibrahim, and very good to talk to you today. I remember many years ago when we were working in economic development, and now we're in the sports sector together. I guess that's where the continent is going, the services sector, the creative sector, the sports sector. And I believe that that's a very important sector for the continent and the economies of the continent to really, really develop, because that's really where the value, I believe, is going to be, the biggest value is going to be going forward. But for me, it's a really interesting new chapter. After almost 2 decades working on tourism, investments, private sector, and now being in the private sector, in the sports sector, I think is very, very interesting. And you talk about my legal background. I think that sports is almost like a convener of different industries. The sports sector brings together, talent. It brings together entertainment, culture, fashion, the creative, different parts of the economy. And so I think that when you're going to bring so many parts and industries together, that's partnerships, that's, deal making, that's putting interests together. And I think lawyers are very good at, putting all interests in one piece of paper or one objective, and I think that I very much look forward to that. And so I think that as I start my career at the NBA Africa, what I really look forward to is to bring more partners on board. I look forward to corporates in Africa seeing sports as a key part of their own trajectories. I see governments, more and more governments, really buying into and investing in sports. I see more talent being unleashed to the world through NBA Africa and BAL. And so I think it's really exciting. And I think a future of more sports activities, I think, is a future of transformation for the continent.
Amazing. As I told you over a decade ago when we met, I had to redo my life. I'll just be a lawyer because it's fundamentally the one place where in business, you are there at the inception of a business. If the business is shutting down, you're there. If to fix the business by acquisition, you're there. If the business making money, you're there to sign the agreement. So clearly, your parents had the right guidance, or yourself, for picking that field. Because even in the field I held my whole career, which is investment and banking, you will find a lawyer run an investment bank, a hedge fund, but you will not find
a banker, run a law firm. You guys enter other fields, but we cannot enter your fields. So very, very defensive territory.
Yeah, actually, law is like a cross-cutting sector. You need law, in sports, in tech, in immigration, there's criminal law, there's all sorts of, legal practice. So yes, it's a cross-cutting sector.
And in the NBA, I've studied a lot their history, and I'm sure you have. This is an industry, an organization from its former name that's over 60 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And like the first 20 plus years, business was not booming. Revenue was taking time. It fundamentally took the arrival of the lawyers to come up with two great concepts over time, one being the salary cap and the other being the media rights. And the salary cap, which actually allowed a set of dollars to sit in one form of escrow account and top up the teams that did less well in the revenue set towards the end of the year to create the balance. That was the ingenuity of a lawyer. The second was the media right, which was basically making sure that there was a preordained set of dollars that was coming from TV and other media outlets into the game. So obviously, in the case of Africa, media right is not as developed as the US. However, in your particular case, you happen to have been in the midst of the only media right transaction I've heard about sports in Europe from an African base. And by that, I'm thinking about Paris Saint-Germain, Arsenal, Bayern, and NBA with Visit Rwanda. How does that happen that at your level, you guys thought about this when there's 54 African countries, but none of us did think about it? What gave you the impetus to first get your heart to go that direction, then think about it, and then execute it?
Well, Ibrahim, first of all, yes, it's true. In my previous life before joining the NBA, I was driving, tourism and hospitality in addition to investments for Rwanda. And that's when we started the Visit Rwanda campaign. But what drove us to think about Visit Rwanda? First of all, we've always thought as a country that we needed to be, to think about creating value and even capturing as much value as we can for our economy. Think about a country like Rwanda at the time, small, no natural resources. We don't have like diamonds and all the things that many other countries in Africa have. And so we had to create services and be innovative about how we do that. And as much as possible, create that value and keep it in Rwanda. And so that always meant that we had to think innovatively. And where can we do things differently? Where can we claim a niche that other countries may take for granted? If you're going to be competing with bigger economies of the continent, and then a number of bigger economies who have a lot of natural resources, a lot of educated people, more educated people than we had, for us to be relevant in this world, we knew that at the time that we had to think differently and we had to think about the niche. And so, in particular, we were looking at tourism. Tourism, getting more people come to the country, spend, get evidence that actually more investments should be made in infrastructure, hotels, and other things. And so we looked at events, bringing events to Rwanda as an opportunity for us to be able to create that value and differentiate ourselves from the rest of the economies. And so we said, okay, we're going to look at it comprehensively. We're going to think about what is it that will bring an event into the country and what is it that is going to keep an event in the country. So it was a comprehensive approach. It was, okay, one, we're going to build infrastructure. So we worked with the support from NBA Africa, BAL, we built a basketball arena. We've just upgraded a stadium in the country. We also thought at the time of golf and cricket, among others. Then at the time, we also thought people coming to Rwanda, it must be really easy. So we removed requirements for visas. And that meant that
I was there at the time.
You're there at the time.
There.
Yeah. So anybody from anywhere in the world can just wake up and go to the country and visit, and they'll get a visa on arrival. And then we also thought, okay, we put these things in place, but we need to be known. People need to want to come to the country. And so we said, what can we do differently in terms of marketing the country? And that's how we started the Visit Rwanda campaign. And we said, where can we, almost, sometimes if you want to create impact, you disrupt the normal.
Yes.
And so we saw sports as a way to really be bold and disrupt how African countries are known to the world. And so having Visit Rwanda on a jersey or with the jerseys with a BAL Visit Rwanda on the jerseys at the front, people were shocked. Like the world was shocked. What is the country doing? But that shock was positive for us because then it created interest.
Yeah.
And what that has meant in terms of that interest is that people are curious. They want to know about this country. They will do more research, which is good. Then they're probably going to get more accurate data than what they usually would read about the country. They're going to maybe come and see for themselves. We've actually had a lot of people that would come to the country when I was still there as RDB saying, I saw Visit Rwanda I'm an Arsenal fan or PSG fan. I came to see for myself what is in this country. That's really good. But the other part that was really interesting, Ibrahim, is when you do something bold like that, you start entering, events deals. You bring BAL to the country. You bring FIFA Congress to the country. You bring cycling competitions to the country. It inspires other organizations to want to come with you because they now see you're a sports event hub. And so sometimes you have to do that initial investment, that initial branding, but then after some time, it almost sells itself because then you've proven yourself, you've been known, and I think that's really the story of the country. And so now that I've moved to this side with the NBA Africa, I believe that experience that I saw in Rwanda is something that we can replicate in other countries. Some countries are already doing it. Senegal, for example, has been hosting BAL for a long time. Egypt has a strong sports sector. But I think this comprehensive approach, building facilities, marketing, visa policies, Rwanda, for example, airline transporting people, that kind of comprehensive approach, I believe can be replicated in many African countries. And to the extent that I can in this new role that I have, I just hope to share that with as many countries because there's evidence that the country actually can benefit economically and also position the country and the continent in a much better way than I think we've all seen enough of, the undesired narrative about the continent. Our continent is beautiful. Yeah. It has a lot of beauty to show. Our continent has talent. Yeah. Our continent has people that are going to the world and excelling. Look at 50 NBA players from Africa. Look at Afrobeats making its way to the world. Look at our art, our culture. So we have the best of everything on the continent, but we haven't been able to optimize. And really, this is the time.
This is the time. No, I love that. And I would love to hear you double click on the economic benefit because I was listening pretty much live to the interview you had with BBC when you first launched the deal for Arsenal. And I remember a lady interviewing you saying, how come a poor country like Rwanda taking 30 million or a number like that to put into sports, into jersey, isn't that frustrating? And your answer, I recall at the time, I was very, very mesmerized by it. So I think it'll be useful to hear the economics of those transactions. And back then that was your first deal. After that, you guys have done 3. So I think it'd be good to show the economics so that other countries can replicate and see that what seems bizarre from far is far from bizarre.
Well, reflecting back to when I was working in Rwanda as the Rwanda Development Board, when we did the Visit Rwanda deal, yes, people were wondering, why is the country with a low GDP and low per capita income spending on advertising itself? For us, we refused that thinking that a country should not be ambitious just because the odds at the time are difficult. You're dealing with challenges like poverty. There's a lot of development that still has to happen. But that doesn't take away your right to be ambitious.
Yes.
And also your right to really see the opportunity for what it is. And so that's what we saw. And I think we also have a duty to educate the world about the opportunity that is there. When we looked at the time, we wanted to double our tourism receipts in Rwanda at the time from $400 to $800 million. And so it wasn't going to be done by just doing the normal things. We had to think about, the innovation outside the box. And sports sector was one way to think about outside the box and bringing events to the country, in addition to people coming for wildlife. If you saw the growth as of last year, when we finished the year and as I was planning to make my move, we made about $620 million from 400 just before the deal was done.
Wow.
And so very closely going towards the $800 million deal that we want. And I'm sure soon the new goal will be let's reach $1 billion in tourism receipts. I see that as a possibility. And absolutely, sports sector contributed, because with the branding of Visit Rwanda in sports, you're getting people to come for wildlife, but also you're bringing sports events. And today, at least by the time I left last year, events were contributing 15% of total tourism revenues. When you look at how much potential there is, we knew that from 15% we could actually grow it up to even 50% of total tourism receipts. We just have to keep growing it going forward. And so the ambition is there, the track record and the results speak for themselves. And sometimes you don't have to speak so much. You just let the results,
the data
speak. And that's the approach you've had in Rwanda. You don't allow to be swayed by skeptics. You don't allow to be swayed by people that are, don't believe in the big picture. You do your best, you educate, but when the results come out, they speak for themselves and it's loud.
And it's amazing. Empty barrel make the most noise, and then eventually, when the result comes, silence.
Yes.
And the other phenomenon I've also observed is, sometimes you read in the press saying, "Oh, why is that country investing in sport? Why is government involved?" In America, in the US, and in France or in UK, the government is not involved.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if you step back and look closely into the facts, especially in the global south, when I'm thinking Saudi Arabia, when I'm thinking UAE, when I'm thinking Qatar, I'm actually seeing sport driven by the government. It seems to be a clear trend that in the global south, it's almost a requirement to have the government in the front. And do you feel the same? Because fundamentally on the continent, sports is becoming a new industry class. And obviously some private sectors like ourselves are playing their role. But it looks from the data that it's almost an imperative that the government needs to be aligned in that strategy and drive the first efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to understand the landscape or the structure of where the operation is happening. You cannot expect the way Africa should operate to be exactly the way more developed countries that have a lot of history of a very strong private sector, very strong infrastructure over the years, strong airports and all of that. These are years of investments that the countries have gone through. While for developing countries, there's still a lot to develop. And when you have a lot to develop, the reason the government plays a key role is because the government has resources. The government is collecting taxes across the economy. And so the government has the resources to do this. Where the private sector is still young and growing, the same amount of resources don't exist. And so you cannot ignore the government in that sense. And we recognize that as well. And so whether it's building arenas or whether it's marketing, whether it's promoting tourism, whether it's promoting sports, government still plays a key role. As the economy grows and more private sector comes, in fact, what I've seen that is changing already in the basketball industry is a lot of the teams were owned by some kind of government entity.
Yes.
You have, ministries, you have customs owning basketball teams.
Or the oil company, or the army.
Or the army. because the private sector hasn't yet seen the opportunity to make money there. What I'm beginning to see, including with Captain Tigers, is that private investors are beginning to invest in sports clubs. I just think that's going to grow. We're going to have more investors investing in clubs and taking over that responsibility from government. But government played a role to put it to that point where the private sector can see the opportunity.
Yes.
And when the private sector sees the opportunity, it's actually really a good step because they begin to invest more resources. They begin to see it as a business. So they want it to be professionally managed. They're going to be investing in talent. And so the outcome will be even much better because it's really seen as a professional business. But that grows over time. And as it grows, the truth is the government that has the resources will play a key role. And so if you're going to compare African countries with other, more developed countries, you're making a mistake because the realities are different and the structures are different. And so also as NBA Africa, we do work closely with governments because governments have a role to develop basketball and sports, and they're complementary effort to what we do. And so we are open to that reality.
Amazing. What that makes me think about is not only the private sector will ultimately and has started taking over from the government where it's left off, but I think even in terms of talent, that's what the NBA has done. It has put you from government as the talent that fits all the dots and requirements and has taken it into the private sector. I think it'll be useful for the audience to know more about Clare Akamanzi, the lady, the lawyer, boss man, has been in leadership position all these years. Why don't you take us all the way down to your legal studies and Harvard and your career, and what was your motivation to take this career track?
Well, Ibrahim, for me, I've benefited from, understanding from a mindset of we need to defy odds. And however much the odds are around you, if you really have a strong belief in where you should be and where you could be, those odds begin to break down. And I've seen that throughout my life. I grew up to refugee parents in Uganda. The history of Rwanda at the time meant that my parents and grandparents had to move as refugees to Uganda. And I remember growing up with kind of an identity problem because my parents never allowed us to really say that we were from Rwanda because it was, they would know that you're a refugee and therefore you didn't be allowed to go to school or you didn't be allowed to go to different places. And so growing up with that identity question, but who am I and why can I not be free to say I'm from this place or this place? And for me, at a young age, I learned how to operate with such difficulties. I don't have the freedom like other kids I go to school with to just be themselves because I know that I'm a child of a refugee. So I have to be very careful about how I interact. But also I have to make sure that I work extra hard to stand out so that I can be, have a better chance of doing well. And so that from the time I went to school, I remember going to law school and being asked, why did you choose to go to law school? But I also remember an uncle of mine who was a magistrate. He became a judge later in Uganda. And I just admired how he seemed to really be an icon of justice. People would follow him. People would come to the gate and try to, talk about all their problems. And some of them were Rwandan refugees who were trying to, solve their issues because they couldn't get all the rights they had at the time. And for me, that made me realize that, when you're a lawyer or a judge or justice, you stand for fairness and justice. And for me, that was very attractive as I went to law school. But while in law school, I discovered commercial law and tax law, and I really enjoyed the business aspect of the law. So I actually ended up focusing so much on I did some work on tax law, I did some work on commercial law, and then I specialized in trade and investment, which is what I really did, trade negotiations, investment negotiations, and that has been a big part of my career in my previous work, always looking for deals to do and all of that. But and then going back to a country, Rwanda, that I didn't grow up in, that I wasn't allowed to say I'm from there. And now being in that country and being part of rebuilding the country, a lot of lessons there. One, I think that became very clear is even if, as I said, the odds are against you, look at a country that was coming from genocide, etc., but being able to stand out and be able to recreate. I think these are lessons that every human being, irrespective of where you come from, can learn, which is it doesn't matter how deep you go or fall. Inside of you, there's always that extra energy that you can tap into. And if you remain focused on what the big picture is of where you're going, there's a lot of distractions. A lot of people are distracted. And if you remain focused, you actually are ahead, because while people are getting distracted by many different things, you're still going and you're remaining focused on the journey that you're going. And so that has been a big part of my career. And I like to see, a story of overcoming those challenges. They give me a lot of inspiration. When you go to a place, and then like I came to South Africa for my law degree in Uganda. I finished my degree in Pretoria in South Africa, which is a much bigger university than the university I was in Uganda. I finished my master's in law with a distinction, and I was really happy that I could come from, this setting, Uganda, refugee, child, come to Pretoria and be able to excel in class, then go to a country like Rwanda, work, and then we were able to do things and show results. And being able to see, even though we've started in a difficult way, you can actually overcome that. And I remember learning from a particular case when Rwanda was trying to become attractive for investments. And we were, ranked by the World Bank Doing Business report as one of the worst performing countries, 150 out of 158. And being part of the team that was leading, technically supported by the leaders of the country, at some point being 29th in the world. So being able to overcome that, for me, was very important. And then later on, I go to school, I go to Harvard.
Yes.
And I'm like, Harvard, the best school in the world. Oh my God. With all the very basic education that I had in a country like Uganda, Rwanda, how am I going to perform at Harvard? And I remember on graduation day being given 3 awards for being, excelling academically. I remember thinking, I can come from Uganda, I can come from Rwanda, I can excel at Harvard. This gives inspiration. It always, like, defying the odds, it doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter how difficult it was, you can go to these places and excel. And I think everyone needs to always remember that it doesn't matter which disadvantage you start with. Just get the energy, get the resources, get most importantly, your inner strength. You can go to all these places and excel as well. And so as I begin this role in NBA Africa, it's really about, this is the African continent. NBA has been extremely successful in the US. We're learning so much from the NBA. We've started a league that is only in its 4th season, just 4 years. It's still a very young league. But if we get the best of ourselves and get that strength that we all have, the players have, the talent the youth have, the executives that I work with on a day-to-day basis, those that have led the foundation the first years, those that are here today, if we get the best of ourselves inside, we can also excel as a league that is very successful on the continent. And I really hope to live that every day and get to that point every day.
Amazing. Super inspiring. Clearly, yes, we can.
Yes.
Today's episode is sponsored by Statement. Statement is a media company focused on editorial coverage and market analysis of the African entertainment industry. Its production arm builds a pipeline for African women filmmakers. Magic Johnson, Samuel L. Jackson, and Latanya Richardson Jackson are among the investors that support the Statement's mission. We are big fans.
The playbook to make it happen is all in here.
Yeah.
And definitely the energy, I can see that you're ready to radiate and make it happen. This is just a new phase, taking the climb to another level. And I'm sure that in your transition, you have a great benefit because there is perception and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So perception is when you are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're coming in with perspective because actually you dealt with the NBA from outside and now you're inside. And I'm pretty sure a lot of the things you've been able to see from that perspective are things that you bring as strategy, as tools that you're going to exploit. Are there some things that you can divulge that is coming in the horizon or in this beginning, things we should really look out for and celebrate?
Well, it's true. Having come from the other side of the table, there's some lessons that I find valuable. One of them is what we want to do, and what in the next few years to come, we want a lot more partnerships.
Okay.
We want a lot more corporate sectors to find sports valuable for their work, and we are going to be looking for those partnerships from different aspects on the continent. And so, having come from being a partner myself, knowing what I wanted at that time when I was partnering with NBA Africa, BAL.
Informs the negotiation.
I think it will inform how we approach our
I feel bad for the other guy. There's the lawyer that they can have because he didn't see the two sides.
Yeah, I think there is a business value proposition that we need to give, but also how we structure and negotiate those deals is very important. But sports is such a big platform.
Yeah.
If you're in the banking sector, telecom sector, fast-moving consumer goods, if you're in whatever sector you are, sports is relevant for you. Relevant for you directly for your business, but also relevant in building a workforce for the future.
Yeah.
A workforce that is disciplined, a workforce that has skills of teamwork, a workforce that understands winning and failing at the same time. These are the skills you learn from sports. And if we get more and more people play and compete in sports, the more we have people with these skills, and these skills that they can apply in any sector, even in those other sectors, and thrive. And this is really what we want to see.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing you said that because I was just speaking in Harvard Business School for the Africa Summit, and I went to visit a friend professor at HBS. His name is Professor Paul Gompers. So he just finished, not long ago, a long study with a couple of other Harvard professors that actually studied the students that are non-athletic and the athletic one. And when you're at school, there is a general belief that, and it's actually the facts, the grades typically from the normal student, the geek is much higher than the one that's athlete. There are some exceptions. So the suspicion people always go in life is that the A+ student that was not doing sport is going to excel in life. But the data now prove over multiple decades that systematically, if you look in a multi-decade way, the athlete ends up getting more income, not because he went into NBA or NFL. Even those that don't make it to the NBA, NFL, tend to perform and be in much wider variety of jobs because of that core discipline, core community, and systematic way to follow a regimen, work with teams, excel. That just translates in many sectors. It's demonstrated in the US, and you can only imagine that what you're saying has resonance to it, that even in this continent, if we push sports alongside academics, you will see that net result because you're creating a better individual for society, someone that's more disciplined and that can take on different tasks and perform in an excellent manner.
It's very interesting that you said that.
I'll send you the research. There's like a full case study and result to it.
Yeah.
Just came out.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I was thinking, along the things you're saying, I think every time an athlete is going to compete is an opportunity to ask themselves, what do I need to do differently to win? And I think that question, that constant discipline of what do I need to do to win? What do I do differently? How can I keep myself in the best possible chances of winning? Because that's what you go to do to sports to do, is a question we need to ask ourselves. And I think that kind of question subdues certain habits that we need to make sure less people have. Complacency, just being comfortable with the average, mediocrity, being comfortable with just enough, or resignation. Sometimes you have resignation. Okay, this is our continent. This is who we are. We can never get to be the best in the world. But I think sports teaches that mindset of
to shift,
to win, the discipline, to look forward, and every day asking yourselves, what do I need to do to win? We want more people with that mindset.
Amen to that. And in terms of you, if you were given a chance to speak to little Claire, age 16, and you could just state 2 sentences at the most in terms of advice, what would you tell little Claire?
there's always another chance.
Mm.
When I was growing up as a little girl, I was always so worried about, what if I fail? What if I don't do this exam? How? What if? And you almost want to kill yourself because you think that, if this doesn't happen the way it happens now, I'm dead.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned over the years, there's always another chance.
Absolutely.
And if you always know that, do your best, but if it doesn't, don't kill yourself. Just go for the second chance. And there are people who do things 10 times and they get it perfect. And so just knowing that there's always a second chance, be true to yourself, be authentic, do your part. And when you do all those things, there's always another chance for you to excel.
One of the big VCs, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Mark Anderson, says that you just need to be right once. You can try as many times, but you just need to be right once. And
your life.
once you know that, your life change.
Yeah, and before you're right, don't give up.
Don't give up.
I think many people just say, "Oh, I tried, I failed," and you resign. That resignation. We need to kill this spirit of resignation because we need to keep trying because that one time of being right will come.
Yes, in fact, I was having a chat on the pod with another guest who is a partner of ours that is establishing Formula E here in South Africa.
Yeah.
And one of his quotes was that if he had to write a book, the book's title will be Failing to Succeed. Basically, I was like, you better patent that quickly, because that's basically an ultimate truth. So you have to quickly write that book, because I would even be tempted to take it.
Yeah.
Because you cannot succeed if you don't fail enough. In fact, the big lesson, a lot of the words that are given to entrepreneurs in tech and the young ones is like, you need to fail faster. In fact, the more you fail, the better.
Yeah.
So you need to actually be like, okay, I failed, so I've got a lesson. So let me fail again.
Yeah.
And then the more you fail, the more you have less lesson to learn.
Yeah.
The problem is actually doing the same exact failure twice. That's when you have a problem.
That's no problem.
But you have a wide window of failure in order to get to success.
Absolutely. And that's something that I've trained myself over the years is, how do I turn this around? Things will always not go the way you want. And whether it's from, the speech you give in a boardroom, or whether it's how you conceptualize an idea, the things will always feel like that didn't go the way I wanted it to go. It's okay. Don't get drowned by that. What I've learned over time is like, okay, how do I turn this around? How do I turn this around? And that's another chance you're giving yourself. And being comfortable to always ask that question makes you more comfortable with even things that don't go well. You don't kill yourself. Like, how can I turn this around? And the truth is, whatever goes bad, whatever doesn't go the way you want it to go, if you think about how to turn it around and make it right, that's what people will remember. It will outshine the other thing. Yeah. So just always, what can I do differently to turn this around?
Amazing. We are in Kalahari Conference. The numbers are looking stunning, and you may know them better than me. The stadium is always full. I mean, clearly it is starting with the bank. What are the metrics so far?
The Kalahari Conference is testament that BAL, the Basketball Africa League, which is part of NBA Africa, is growing. It's a story of growth. It's a story of expansion. And for us, it's really interesting because our fans are growing and they're getting more engaged. We're so happy to be here in South Africa and to see how the fans are reacting in South Africa, in Pretoria. When you go out, our weekend games are fully sold out.
Every day I'm getting calls every day. Tickets. There's no more seats. No more seats.
Yes, and for me, what is even interesting is, apart from this arena being sold out, you look at the behavior of the fan. Those are the kind of fans we like. They're engaging, they're singing, they're dancing, they're following, every score. They celebrate when there's a score. They really are there, very much engaged, and I think that's the kind of fun we have. But it also shows that basketball is getting into the spirit of more and more people on the continent, and for us that is a story and evidence that we need to keep investing, we need to keep expanding, and it's going to be a story of more expansion, more growth, more teams playing or accessing the game, and and more partnerships, more identification and being able to relate with the game for many, businesses as well as fans on the continent. So I'm looking to a future of growth.
Super. We could not be happier because, us as hosts with the Tigers, the fact that NBA finally hosted this tournament in South Africa, we couldn't be happier. We've been just waiting, begging for this to happen. And just so happy to see everybody see the testament of the fans.
Yeah.
This is a country that probably has the most plurality of sports than any in the continent. It's the only country where you're actually going to find number one being rugby, not soccer. Number two being maybe cricket ahead of soccer. And then soccer only around number three. And then, basketball is probably a number 4 or 5. But despite all that competition, you're getting 10,000 plus people fighting to enter one stadium. So it shows you that what sits here in South Africa is massive. It's also probably the country, because of the other 4 sports ahead of basketball, have a massive dollar allocation for it. And it's only for NBA to kind of already take a piece of an existing habit. In other markets, that habit is still not there. But at least here you have rugby, where this country is number 1 globally. So that really, I'm like you, I think the growth that emanates from here and across the continent will be, if not great, it might be ridiculously massive.
Yes, and for us, it was good to have the Kalahari Conference because we have our home here. We have an office.
Yeah, the headquarters is here.
Yes,
since the beginning
in South Africa. Yes, and also to be in a country that is very sports, oriented, as you said, other sports as well. The country is very much into sports, and I think that really helps. But also, what we're seeing is that there's growth of basketball, understanding, love, access. And so the more we do things here, the more we see the basketball game growing, which is already clearly growing.
Yeah, growing. And it's going to be number 1. We're going to make it be number 1 together. We're taking over rugby. My last question I ask people always is, what is the nicest thing someone ever did to you?
Someone's?
Did to you. The kindest or nicest thing someone did to you?
I think the nicest things that anybody has done to me is a word of encouragement. The words that I hear from people stay in me for a long time, and they keep coming back. And so a word of encouragement, even if it's said on the spot or said for a particular reason, is a seed that is implanted in my subconscious that keeps coming back to drive me. So words of encouragement are the nicest things you can ever do to people, because those are seeds planted in someone's subconscious, and they'll always go back to that subconscious to get the strength they need internally to move on. So for me, it's words of encouragement.
Ah, man, this is beautiful. Claire, stay blessed and looking forward to all the success ahead.
Thank you.
Hey, if you like today's story, press like, leave a comment, subscribe, come back for more stories from founders and funders changing the face of sports, tech, entertainment, and fashion from Africa to the rest of the world. We look forward to seeing you again soon.